program is Education Radio, aired every Saturday from 8 to 9 in the morning on RadioBandido.TV, simulcast on DZRJ 8:10 a.m., on Sky Cable Channel 224, TV Plus boxes, and on free-to-air TV, facebook.com, DZRJ 8:10 a.m., and our official YouTube channel. Don't forget to watch Education Radio every Saturday, where we take the streets into the classroom and the classroom to the streets.
Good morning, Manila. Good morning, Philippines. Good morning, world. Welcome to Education Radio. And again, we have Secretary Ernesto Abella. Thank you, sir, for being on our show today. Good morning, sir.
Hi, Pia. It's great. It's a great privilege to be here and to discuss matters of import for the nation with you. Thank you also.
Thank you, sir, because I had a good week, actually, since you were asking me how I am. And the whole week was about you, because people were actually calling me on our show last week, giving me feedback and also offering invitations like what I mentioned to you the other day, that hopefully you could join them in some of their forums. And with permission, I already gave your number, your contact to them. So I think you can expect more things coming your way, sir. And if I'm making you work more, I apologize as early as now. But I think the Philippines needs you and your wisdom. And that would really be very, it's a treasure for all of us, especially educators and our learners out there. Right? So as early as now, thank you, sir. I'd like to be seeing you in all these forums.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Pia, for opening doors for us. But basically, I think it's really for all of us, no? Para sa atin lahat talaga to. Dahil, mukhang hinog ang Pilipino sa pagbabago. And I think we're all, lahat nitong quest natin. And last time we talked about national security, about the bases. And today we talked about, we're going to talk about about education. And hopefully next time, kung meron pa, kung may invitation ka pa.
Of course, sir. There are people watching you. I want to say hi also to ISDI. Thank you for Austin for always keeping in touch with me. And we have lots of things in common kasi. So thank you for all that. And here's Secretary Abella again for your, I hope that you will enjoy today's show. And I hope, sir, you'll have the time always to be in my show kasi mamaya you're super in demand na. Because everybody wants to talk and learn from you.
We need a place for to anchor us. And I feel this is a very apt platform. Una-una kasi ikaw personally interesado ka. Ang nakikita ko naman, ang hinahabol mo, hindi naman yung popularidad o numero or what. Hinahabol mo talaga yung kapakanan ng bayan. So we're with you in that. So thank you also.
I want to also share, sir, some of our learners. I have really good feedback from them in the sense that they have told me in the past week that, Miss Pia, I really find myself being rooted here in the Philippines. So I think we're also doing our part to inspire them to be pro-Philippines and pro-Filipino at such a young and ripe age. After all, it's their turn, sir. They're in their 20s and they really want to give back already. So that's good news to hear from these young people.
Right.
So, yeah, today, sir, I also mentioned to the others that, yes, we're going to be hitting on education today and on the nationalism aspect. And it's very good that we'll be talking about nationalism in education because if I remember correctly, even when I was in high school still, my classmates and I would be a little bit confused as to what it meant, the difference between that and patriotism, and how we were supposed to respond to it. Maybe our current situation and not just in the Philippines, but also in the world, is enabling us to understand these concepts or ideology so much better and helping us to be more pro-Filipino. So maybe, sir, we can begin by you telling us and the learners what nationalism in education really is all about.
Okay. Siyempre alam natin na may ano no, may mga different schools regarding the definitions. But basically siguro what I'd like to begin with is the idea that patriotism is a general feeling of love of country, love of place. Like for example, pag may nadinig kang Pilipino na kanta when you're abroad, medyo maiiyak ka ng konti. So, pero nationalism is a sense that you actually have nationalism is a sense that meron ka talagang national identity. Malinaw siya. Like for example, you're aware of the values, you're aware of the symbols, of course, but also that you're aware of the national interests. And that you have you're not saying today kasi there's a tendency to consider nationalism as something scary and freaky and creepy kasi parang sinasabi mo you're better than others. No, the way we understand it is that nationalism is a very clear understanding of who you are. It's a sense of identity, and nationalist education would be to prioritize national interests for our survival.
Yeah.
Kasi kaya naman natin nasabi yan, Pia, is because experience has shown us that there are two things that seem to be, and even if you go through our social media, no, the discussions flying here and there, may tendency to medyo hindi malinaw kung ano yung talagang mga national issues. Hindi malinaw kung ano yung talaga mga national ills. And the other one is, there is still the parang apathy, may apathy when we start talking about the national well-being and sort of that sort of thing. So, basically, patriotism is pagmamahal sa bayan at nationalism is ang pagkakakilala kung sino tayo bilang Pilipino. So, yun.
Because you mentioned like national issues and national ills, one of the questions that I was going to ask later on, but I think right now it's timely. Would you think that our nationalism is diluted? Has it been diluted in the sense of our education?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. That's a very important question. Actually, I don't know if it's even diluted. In fact, it's almost non-existent.
Mm-hmm.
Kasi yung during the Spanish period, the ones who really were educated were not the public. It was the elite, the ilustrados, because they could afford it, no. And of course, when the Jesuits came, meron naman talaga silang educational policy that they only selected those who were leaders or going to be potential leaders. But when the Americans came, meron silang kasi the Americans are noted, no, for their public education. Mm-hmm. So when they brought public education here, first we have to understand what they were doing. What public education was meant in the US. It was meant to serve their national interest. Mm-hmm. And they were already an industrial nation. So kumbaga yung education nila was geared towards equipping their citizens to become productive workers of their industrial nation. Pero dito sa Pilipinas kasi ang nangyari, there seems to be if you really look at it, education kasi is meant to the way they when they applied the American style of education here, first they used English.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Hindi naman kasi tayo hindi naman tayo Amerikano. Mm-hmm. So yung unang-una nga hindi pa nga tayo Pilipinong buo dati, hindi ba? So iba-iba, may Tagalog, may Ilonggo, may Cebuano, may Bisaya. But they said, okay, we'll teach you in English because so that everybody can understand one another. However, the difficulty is people are not used to thinking in English. Mm-hmm. Concepts are very difficult to learn in English.
Yes.
You know, so kumbaga, what happened to us is that we were receiving not a Filipino education. We were receiving an American colonial education. We were being educated to become part of of the American colony, of the American empire. So hindi talaga na forma, hindi talaga nabuo yung ating Filipino identity.
Yes.
So hindi siya na-dilute actually, kumbaga naudlot.
Naudlot, and are we confused? It has left us confused, going from the Spaniards and then the Americans. Are we so confused, sir?
Yeah, alam mo kasi, what happened was, actually, the Philippine Revolution against the Spanish period, against the Spanish colonials, was actually a brilliant teaching moment sana. It could have, again, let me go back to that. It could have given us a Filipino identity. What would have been that identity? Tayo yung nalupig for 300 years, but now we because of our efforts, we have broken free from that kind of period, and now we are free and we can shape our own destiny. Nagkaroon sana tayo ng sense of agency, self-determination. Yun ang nawala. Kasi yun sana, hindi ba even in, Pia, you're an educator, right? Sa personal development, may period na yung bata dependent sa magulang. Tama?
Yes.
Pero kaya tinuturuan sila, sige, mag-ano kayo, ikaw na magtali ng ano mo, ikaw na magtali ng sintas ng sapatos mo, ikaw na magpakain sa sarili mo. Kahit na magulo yung bata, kahit na marumi, nakakadumi, you allow him so that he can have agency. He can determine what he does. Yun ang nawala sa atin. Nung nanalo tayo, supposedly, kasi talo tayo, ang nangyari, nakuha sa atin. Kumbaga para sasabihin ng nanay, hindi mo kaya magtanong, ako na magtali ng sapatos mo, ako na magpakain sa kasi hindi mo kaya kasi marumi ka, magulo ka. So we remove the agency, the ability to determine our own future from ourselves. So nawala yung ating sanang yung sense of self. Yun ang nawala sa atin. Naisahan tayo ron. You know, well, siyempre,
ang sakit naman, sir. Sakit.
Yun ang nangyari sa atin.
But it's the truth. Yes. Yun ang nangyari.
So that's what we're trying to correct. Again, let me just say, we're not being anti-this or anti-that.
Yes.
We're simply saying, okay guys, talo tayo no, pero sige, simula ulit tayo. Let's start from ground zero. Parang ganon.
Yes. Better to start somewhere naman, right?
Correct.
So, sir, why is it now so important to really foster this in our educational system? I mean, from then, like, let's say my high school days till now, we've come across a lot of articles. I specifically came across a nice one. It was actually a speech in 1985, and it was in St. Joseph's College. And I like what she said. This lady, her name is, I did my homework, sir. Leticia Constantino.
Yeah.
Have you read that? I think there was a symposium, and I think it was a really good read. It was educating for Filipino nationalism.
Okay, sige, tell us about it.
Okay, so she was saying that education for nationalism means educating for national and social purpose. It means going beyond but not neglecting the conventional tasks of training a person to earn a living and developing his intellect, skills, and character. So we are consciously, as she goes further, educating Filipinos to be Filipinos, Filipinos who work for the Philippines and the Filipino people, and to be pro-Philippines and pro-Filipino, so that we develop our national pride. With that, we have that national pride and sense of national identity, which is everything that you're saying also right now.
Right. I totally agree. Of course, pag nag-aral tayo, we're learning skills, no? But the perspective should be that we're learning skills because because in the back of our mind, we want to use these skills for nation building and not just for sa kapakanan ng pamilya natin. No, for my personal education or for my personal advancement, but also for the national advancement. Kasi meron tayong sense of being part of a larger community. You know, right now, like for example, you said na we're teaching with the, meron kang, I think you mentioned something there with na you're teaching with the with the well-being of the Filipinos in mind, no?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Alam mo, I watch some TikTok.
Yeah.
There are some kids there who, she's no longer a kid. There's one particular one I really am past. You know, I get happy listening to her, but I know it's a bit of a guilty pleasure because she's so funny, but she's so funny in a very painful way to me. Huh?
Okay.
I won't mention the name, but maybe they'll find out. You know, she's a Povedan.
Oh my gosh, I'm a Povedan.
You're a Povedan. Okay. So, you know, she's making fun of yung kanilang sariling and then she makes fun also of she's a Povedan. She went on to Ateneo, and so she makes fun of the Ateneo accent, and she makes fun of the Lasal accent and stuff like that. But if you notice, it's not national. It's yung pinag-uusapan niya is there is a certain world inside the Philippines. It's the world of private schools. You know, it is the world of private schools. No offense, kasi siya pinagtatawa niya. She will say, oh, andyan na yung bakal boy mo. Meaning to say, yung lenggo, sa lingwahe nila, sa slang nila, o andyan na yung sundo mong boyfriend mo, or something like that. So, but basically, can you imagine this? Yes, and appreciate the fact that they talk about they talk Filipino and stuff like that. Pero yung perspective nila, and no offense, man, is this small social world that is basically in the NCR region. It's a little bit, hindi and I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying hindi kasali ang bigger, mas malaking mundo. So, and the tendency is this: when they grow up and they become lawyers and they become politicos, there's a tendency to still think in terms of your small world. Maybe it becomes your class, your social class. It becomes your family. Alam mo, katulad up to now, ang pinag-uusapan, hot item naman, or the top 40 families, or the top so and so family.
Yeah.
So, kumbaga, kung gano'n ang mundo natin, hindi talaga natin, bulag tayo sa, nabubulag tayo because of the education.
That makes perfect sense. You're right, sir. How difficult it is to go step out of that, right? Because even this lady, she's saying like, we kind of have to like step out of something.
Correct.
Right? But how do you do it? How do you balance? How do you balance your person developing your skills with the needs of the world or your country, right? How do you balance, the world that you come from and put it alongside the world that this truly is?
Right.
Like, if I may say so, sir, like in my experience, for example, I thought at the beginning that, hey, I already have a lot of achievements. I've been in media, I've handled country to country agreements, I speak Spanish and all this and like that. And I thought that I know a lot already until I joined the armed forces as a reserve. That's when I said, my gosh, I'm so kulelat, I know nothing about my fellow people, and it's where I learned. And then Marawi happened, right? So in my mind, I was really humbled, and I had to step up again and relearn things.
Okay. So I think we have the seed of an answer sa response mo, no? Una-una, you consciously stepped out of your comfort zone. I don't know, saan ba nanggaling yung desire mo na baka biglang sumali sa armed forces?
The truth, I'll say the truth.
Because,
It's because when I handled the country to country agreement, I spoke Spanish, and then the rest of the Filipinos, even like ministers, didn't understand Spanish. So I knew how the other countries were thinking, and so I was able to negotiate. And then I realized that I think at one point there was like a frigate that came from Mexico, and then the Filipinos were like looking at each other, not understanding each other, and I understood it. And then I said, I need to join talaga be a reserve, because ayoko na hindi natin naiintindihan yung mga
okay,
pinagsasabi.
I have one other question for you. Saan nanggaling yung sense of identity mo bilang Pilipino? Did that happen at home, family, discussion, politics, or what? What sparked it?
At home, sir. And I'll be very specific. My grandfather, really,
Okay.
I mean, he was a guerrilla war hero, and he really inspired me to love my country so much.
Okay.
And so that's why.
Okay, one additional question. How did he inspire you?
He
Kwento like that?
went about the war, how difficult it was, how at some point, you really become torn, because you're even told, like, don't come down to, let's say, the towns, because the Japanese are, sorry about saying that, but that's history, are looking for you, and they might kill the rest of the town people, mga ganyan. But then you're torn between giving your family or the rest of the people food and fighting a war, right?
Okay.
So I felt that struggle, and I said, of course I want to be that kind of person where I fight for my family and I fight for my people. And I
Okay.
felt that from my grandfather.
Right. So you're asking, where do we begin?
Yeah.
How do we begin the re-education of the Filipino? Okay. Among other things, one very big thing is what you just mentioned, your family. Sa pamilya, dapat meron tayong kinukwento. Meron tayong kwento, may narrative tayo. Pero usually, ang narrative natin, depende kung ano. Pero like in your case, you're blessed by the fact that your grandfather was actually involved in nation.
Yeah.
In creating a path for the nation. Kasama siya. Meron talagang pagmamahal. So one, we need inspirational stories. Una talaga, we need strong narratives and inspiration about love of country, love of our values. Kumbaga yung mga ganong kwento ng heroism natin, yung kwento ng mga heroism ng tao natin. So part of that is that. Now, let me ask you one thing. How did they make kwento? In Spanish?
Spanish? In Spanish, yes. He spoke to me straight Spanish. Yes, sir.
Why didn't he speak in English?
I don't know, because I was just I think it's because I was one of his last few grandchildren who spoke Spanish.
Okay. So ang puntos ko dito is language matters.
Yes, it does.
Language matters. You learned, nakuha mo because you were speaking a common language.
Mm-hmm.
Tinanong ko bakit hindi English? Kasi hindi ka naman sanay ka sa Espanyol, di ba?
Yes.
Sanay ka sa Espanyol. Eto yung kababayan natin, saan sila sanay? Sa English, Espanyol, o sa lingua?
Tagalog or their dialect. Yes,
correct.
Yes.
Now, alam mo, there's an educator, a scholar, I think his name is 𝗘𝗱𝘂𝗰𝘁𝗶𝗏 or something like that, na nagsasabi siya, alam mo, like for example, before I go into that, alam mo, when I was growing up, I kept, I went to luckily, I went to a public school from grades 1 to 6 because the school was just right near our house. And then there was a guy who was somehow very adept in arithmetic. But he would say, 10 divide by 2, divide. Sabi ko, ano yung divide? Well, Alam mo yung, di ba? O kaya yung Jack be nimble and Jack be quick. Ano yung Jack be nimble? Jack be nimble pala, Jack be quick. I'm not criticizing the pronunciation. All I'm saying is that there were certain concepts that I could not get simply because the guy who was explaining it to me was using language that, hindi naman, kung sinabi niya, kasi during that time in Davao, Tagalog pa yung malakas. Kung sinabi niya, ang 10, hati-hatiin natin sa 5, mas naiintindihan ko yon. O mas naiintindihan kunyari, in-explain ng teacher na ito, hatiin natin to. Kumbaga, using a common language to bring together principles. So what I'm saying is that in the beginning, education needs to transfer concepts and principles to form the thinking process. But if you use English, hindi mo nga ano yung dibay-dibay?
Yeah.
Ano yung dibay-dibay? Hindi mo nga the trouble with learning, with education, using a foreign language, is that it's very difficult to find the right words to transmit a certain concept. Yung everyday concept mo, hati tayo. Hati tayong ganyan. So it has to be, so what I'm saying, number one, kasi ang tanong mo kanina, where do we begin? How do we begin? Number one, siguro, we need to learn our story, which is our history. Number two, we need to be able we need to effectively use language that will help our students have a grasp. No? Mahalaga para I know that right now may multilingual, blah, 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 sort of thing. But I'm saying it's deeply, deeply important that language should be used, a common language should be used, especially during the formative years. Pangatlo, I believe not just the history, but also the learning of certain values should happen early.
Yes.
It should happen. So kung sa bahay, sa eskwelahan, o kaya kung as is happened now, there are more than 10 million Filipinos outside, and that translates to about 40 million Filipinos being affected locally, hindi ba? Kasi 1:4 yan at least 4. So kumbaga, yung values na masyado na atomize kaagad ang mga Pilipino. So yung values, so let me go back. Our story, our language, and our values need to be strengthened at a very early age, and with a sense, not just kasi nandiyan naman sa natin, maka-Diyos, maka-tao, and all that, makabayan.
Yes.
So dapat yung mga values maituro sa pagkabata pa. In the same way that ako personally, I advocate that children should be taught traffic rules from the very beginning, hindi ba? Aside from the fact...
You're talking early childhood education, sir.
Say, begin early. Begin early.
Yeah. I get you there. I feel you. I agree. I really agree. Even language-wise, right? Like, they are already saying start early. At 5, at 4, I mean, sir, we see these things like, well, I know Solen. I don't know if you know her, Solen Husaf and her husband. They speak to their daughter in 3 different languages, or at least 3 different languages. And she's very young. She's, I think, 4 or something. So it makes sense what you're saying, that at a very early age, we should begin incorporating all these things. Pero ang tanong is, paano kung wala kang role model?
In which case, this is where I think 2 sectors of society we need intervention from 2 sectors of society. Number one, government. No, government, okay, but that's medyo medyo complex. Pangalawa, yung civil society. When I say civil society, I mean yung support groups coming from, the public mismo. If we can inspire, let's say, if we can inspire, ang tawag nito, the public, patriotic, the more patriotic sectors to get involved in civic education.
Yeah.
Like for example, matagal ko na dream ito, Pia, yung tawag na, of course, yung tawag ko Junior Explorers. Junior Explorer. Kasi nakita ko ito, I was in the beach one time, I think it was Matabukay na Subo. And I saw it overnight, may mga there were kids running around. Meron silang troop leader. I think it turned out they were coming from one private school here in the south. Boys. Tapos meron sila tig-isa silang flashlight, takbuhan sila doon, tapos nanonood sila ng stars, o kaya they were doing a lot of activities. Pero nakita ko, and I also grew up kasi, Pia, I grew up in a Protestant community. Hindi siya born again, hindi siya Catholic, although I went to a Jesuit school late, to Jesuit state. And the Jesuits got into my head. But I grew up Protestant. And we had it was a small community. And we had very strong youth groups. It wasn't about religion. It was just, it was funny nga. May mga Halloween pa, may mga summer camps, may mga Easters. Ang akala ko nga that Easter was about eggs. Pero what I'm saying is that where do you get role models? I mean, kung wala sa pamilya, ang suggestion ko is katulad yun, religious groups, school groups can come in, step in, and help build. But there has to be an awakening, kumbaga consciousness raising sa ating mga kababayan.
But you see, sir, I also learned in this symposium from this lady, okay, her speech, and that nationalism actually has two components. So, paano kung wala tayong role model? Tapos meron pa ito, two components ng nationalism. We have to learn it, which is one part of it is anti-imperialism. Another part of it is the democratic component. So if you're saying, if you're a nationalist, you believe that your country's resources must be preserved for your people, for the Filipino people. Then on the other hand, the democratic component is it must favor majority of our people economically in terms of like the greater participation in government, planning, and decision making. Okay, how again now? Kasi from how I see it, it's so easy to talk about being nationalistic, but then the process of, really, yeah, it's long.
Yun ang mahaba. Now, when I say, of course, I understand I understand the language, I understand the sentiment, but I believe that if we emphasize more being pro-Filipino and prioritizing national interests and education, I'm talking now beyond, going beyond the preschool, and if we can begin to develop if we can develop critical thinking among our students, no? Ito yung, for example, I would say that a component of national education should be, number one, it should teach about democracy. When you say democracy, I mean to say the fact that every individual is actually a participant and has a right a right and a responsibility to participate in nation building. Okay, it's a democracy. Hindi tayo hierarchy, hindi tayo monarchy, hindi tayo dictatorship. Ganun. Pangalawa is we need citizens education.
Yeah. My gosh. Yes. That's nice though. Love it.
Pero mahalaga yon. They need to understand that, yes, you have rights, but you also have responsibilities.
Mhm.
Okay? Pay your taxes, be honest, stuff like that. Okay. Pangatlo is an appreciation of the rule of law.
Mhm.
Na dapat, maano tayo, hindi sensitive, naintindihan natin ang batas.
Mhm.
At hindi lang na maintindihan natin ang batas. Kumbaga kasi hindi naman tayo Catholic country in the sense na ang Pope ang presidente natin, but we are a secular country na kung saan ang batas becomes our Biblia.
Yeah.
You know, the law, the Constitution becomes our, what do you call it? Our guide. Yun ang pinakaano natin. And then next is, we need ito dalawa, nationalistic, in the sense na ito po, this is where it kicks in. We should prioritize Filipino interests.
Mhm. Yeah.
Pero pangatlo, we also need to learn global citizenship.
Mhm. Mhm.
When we say global citizenship, we understand that we need to interact. Hindi na we need to interact with other nations. Pero katulad dito, ito, I'll just touch on a little bit. Yung katulad dun sa RCEP, yun yung pumapasok na, di ba?
Okay. Yes. I like this. Okay, go.
Hindi ba, kunyari, you open up immediately, and of course, I'm open to foreign direct investments.
Mhm.
But let us make sure that these foreign direct investments will not abuse, will not disenfranchise our local, hindi lang local entrepreneurs and businessmen, our local laborers.
Yes. Yeah.
Hindi ba? Kasi right now, supposed to be, actually, it's a labor's market, no? We can actually be selective. Kasi right now, dati kapitalista ang malakas, no? Ngayon, it's the labor. Ang galing kaya ng mga tao natin.
Yes, true.
And then, ang laki na ating workforce. So, ang ano ko dyan is that, I'm not, yes, I would frame it this way. I would frame it that we should be pro-Filipino. We should live by the rule of law and democracy. Okay, fine, andyan na tayo. But we should prioritize Filipino interests.
Mhm.
We should kausap ko yung kasama namin sa bahay no isang gabi.
Mhm.
Sabi niya, "Uy sir, meron yung aking mga kababayan, tiga North sila, Pangasinan. Nandiyan na daw sila nagtatrabaho sa isang factory dito." Sabi, ganun ba? Bakit? Sabi, dati kasi, nagtatrabaho sila sa farm.
Mhm.
Sila yung tumutulong sila sa pag-aani.
Mhm.
Ngayon, sabi niya, ano nangyari sa kanila? Mga 5 yata sila. Ngayon kasi na-mechanize na. Meron na, may makina na raw. So, mabilis yung pag-aani, kumikita yung may-ari, pero sila walang trabaho.
Oo. Mhm.
So, naghanap sila ngayon ng trabaho all the way. Yeah, fine. Mabuti nga may konting trabaho. Pero sabi ganun, magkano ba ang sweldo? Sabi niya, kahit na magkano na lang, kahit na 5 piso, tatanggapin ko na. Hala.
Diba? Paano yun?
Parang, kasi, hindi nila alam ang kanilang mga kapakanan, ang kanilang mga rights. Rights ba yun? Their rights. Tapos, hindi rin sila protektado. So, ang sinasabi ko, papasok sila sa isang export industrial zone, processing zone. Ang baba ng mga sweldo, abuso. Tapos, yung mga tira, hindi nga healthy.
Yeah.
Kasi hindi ba, kaya naman pumapasok ang isang kumpanya sa isang lugar. Kasi ang perception, mababa yung sweldo rito. They're leaving China because tumataas ang sweldo sa China. They're coming to this place and they're hoping na cheaper. Akin, dapat win-win.
Yeah.
Hindi ba?
And if it's a labor's market also, sir, right?
Correct. Pero kung ang ano, pero kung yung tao na nagpapapasok sa kanila, ganun-ganon, eh ang kanya ano lang yung he's only concerned about his social class. Hindi sa ano, hindi niya ipagtatanggol ngayon yung tao.
Yes. Yung tao po ba na nagpapapasok sa kanila, Pilipino din?
Facilitated by.
Yan, nako, ang sakit.
Facilitated by. Eh, hindi yung, kasi it's a local processing zone, hindi ba?
Yes, yes.
So, hindi naman may-ari niya ng Amerikano o ano ba?
Yeah. So now, sir, doesn't that infringe on the whole idea of nationalism that should have two components of your being a nationalist, and that democratic component where majority must benefit the Filipino? In this,
yeah, precisely. Yun ang puntos ko. Sabi ko na apektado ngayon yung marami. Apektado, well, to make it more concrete. Apektado yung 5. Galing sila sa Pangasinan, pumunta ng Cavite para magtrabaho. Fine, may konting sweldo. Nahiwalay sila sa pamilya nila.
Oo.
You know, so hindi ko naman sinasabi na okay, hindi na no, I'm not looking for a perfect world. But I'm looking for a more just and a more fair world.
Yes, I understand that. And I think it goes back to what this lady again was saying, and maybe you will also agree that, you know, we have to, educating Filipinos or for Filipino nationalism includes developing his intellect, his skills, and his character. But it seems in this sense, at least for the 5 people here, sila mismo hindi nila alam. Diba? Yeah.
Ang kanila, ano na lang, survival. Ang sasabihin na buti nga may trabaho eh. Eh, ganun din ang pag-iisip nung nagkumuha sa kanila. Buti nga may trabaho kayo eh. Sa lagay eh, may sweldo na nga kayo, gusto niyo pa sapat.
Oo nga eh. So, hindi rin nila, sir, alam yung issues, di ba? Kasi dapat alam natin ang issues. Hindi nila alam ang issues.
Hindi nila alam yung para sa kanila.
Tama. So it would have been great because if we're talking about how we incorporate all these things in education from a very young age, if we started with being taught about learning history, diba? You can do that at a young age, like even in early childhood. Our culture, our practices, respecting, let's say, our national anthem, speaking our own language, it begins with that until we move forward to, you know, the like high school and college where we become more aware of issues, right, of concerns, until we start joining the workforce where dapat sa atin, pag kasi nasa workforce na tayo or as adults, buo na tayo doon. Ang ibig lang sabihin nito, sir, hindi talaga tayo buo.
Tama ka, Pia. Ang identities natin remain very nuclear, no? Very wala tayong pero hindi ganoon ang Pilipino. Ang Pilipino makabayan eh.
Yeah.
Makabayanihan. Hindi ba? Willing tayo niyan eh. Gusto natin yan. We like helping one another. We like, you know, pitching in. We like that. Ayaw natin maabuso. Ayaw natin maabuso. Ayaw natin pinagsasamantalahan tayo. Yung gusto natin there must be an exchange of trust, hindi ba?
Yes.
Yun ano natin. So kaya naman in a sense naintindihan natin kung bakit ang Pilipino apathetic kasi unang-una parang napaso, alam mo yon, once burned twice shy. Yung parang para sa kanila lang naman yan. Kasi unang-una hindi rin natin maintindihan. Alam natin may mali, hindi natin alam kung saan.
Oo, yan nga eh.
Hindi ba? Like for example, corruption in the Philippines, saan ba nagagaling yan? For example, ang pinakamalakas talaga rent-seeking. You know, yung at saka yung lagay-lagay, yung ganun-ganun.
Yeah.
You know, pero in a sense, it's become part of, kung gusto mong kumilos, parang it's almost become part. Pero ganun na lang ba talaga yan?
Yeah.
So that is where we expect that an inspirational leadership should be able to provide vision and the means to achieve the vision. At saka ano, yung kumbaga, ang hinahanap talaga natin na yung mga leader na parang pag may pagmamahal sa bayan at alam nila ipaglalaban ka, hindi yung kanilang grupo lang.
Yes.
Di ba?
Yes.
Yun lang.
So you're talking about leaders in civic society. There are leaders in civic society too, like who can, really propel and move things forward. And in the educational system, that would be the teacher. So this means that these people have vital roles, right? What should their role be? Would it be like, is it manifested in their teaching style, their values, right? I think for a teacher, we could say that it's somewhat manifesting in their teaching style, where as a young child, they can see, oh, my teacher, she's really pro-Philippines. Diba? She's showing it in the way in our classroom, right?
I think it's an art, no?
It is an art. It's pedagogy, right, sir? Isn't that what it is?
Correct. I'm glad you mentioned pedagogy kasi I was thinking about how to bring in Paulo Freire, yung kanyang pedagogy of the oppressed. Di ba kasi their situation in their country was revolutionary. So sasabihin niya, 3 grenades plus 3 bullets, yung mga tipo ganun. Hindi naman tayo ganun. Ang sinasabi ko, say, for example, kunyari, paano natin paghahati-hatiin ang isang manok sa pamilyang 5, tatay, nanay, 3 anak, tapos sasabihin pa, andyan si lolo, si lola, kasi extended family tayo, di ba? So, kumbaga, instead of saying, kumbaga, ganon, tapos, anong solusyon? Di ganon. Tapos, pwede kasing sabihin na, alam mo, we can give context. We need to give context. The other one is to be able to point out na yung by implication, katulad sa sabihin, dapat hati-hati tayo na maayos, bigyan natin. Pumapasok yung pagmamahal, pagkikipagtungo, tapos malasakit, ganon. That's one. Among other things. The other one is, dapat kumayod tayo. Well, alam mo yung pwede kasing ipasok by giving the right context. Ako, honestly, Pia, this is ridiculous. But when I was very, very young, I had my ninang was a doctora. She was the head of this Presbyterian hospital and she had a lot of children's books. And she would give me stacks and stacks of children's books. Alice in Wonderland, The Little Red Train, The Train, mga tipong ka. And I grew up, sabi ko, I grew up looking at pictures of blonde kids and snow and Santa Claus and, blah, blah, blah. And ako naman, sa sobrang na-influence ko, naglagay na rin ako ng mga ang tawag dito ng mga medyas for Christmas Eve. 24 naglagay ako. And in 25, wala naman laman.
Yeah.
Yun ang una kong awakening.
Yeah.
Ito, peke pala.
For me, it was Cinderella. There was no such glass slipper around.
But then I really realized na, okay, sandali. Then when I looked at the mirror, hindi naman ako blonde. Wala, pagdungo ko, wala naman snow. May ulan, may putik. Then na-realize ko, sandali, magkaiba yata itong ko. Although I love the stories.
Yeah.
I realized, sandali, may mali. There's a certain gap. Can you, since my situation was a middle-class situation, can you imagine the disappointments that others have when we talk about, when the kids talk about like democracy, justice, ano yung democracy, ano yung justice?
Yeah, malabo, di ba, sir? Parang malabo. Right.
These are abstract concepts,
Yes. Which leads me to my last question, sir. I love that we're trying to incorporate this as it should be really in the educational system. It's not like it hasn't been, but really,
of course.
It is still there, but really just making it stronger, building on it further. But considering that our nationalism is diluted, or sabi mo nga kanina, wala nga eh, di ba? Parang, and now we're saying malabo, right? How now can we try to tie things up with the present situation, with what's happening in our country today, or even in the world, right? There's so many things going on in the world. And sometimes we can say it feels like a tug of war sometimes, right? How do we now jump to that and move, right? Or
yeah.
even create a movement.
I'm glad you said that.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said that. Kasi syempre we have to operate within our sphere of influence, right?
Mhm.
Okay. And so basically I go back to this, no? Government at the top, private sector, civil society. Okay. But meron sa baba eh.
Mm.
Yung ikaw, the you.
The you.
The
Yung
you.
tayo, sir.
Tayo, di ba? So ang ano ko dito is, meron kasing they call it the diamond principle. Hindi ba yung the diamond rule pala? Hindi ba yung golden rule is do unto others or do not do unto others what you don't want others to do unto you? The diamond rule is you have to do what only you can do.
Mm-hmm.
Hindi ba? I mean, if others can if others can do it, wag ka na. Pero ano yung kaya mong gawin ikaw mismo?
Mm-hmm.
Like for example, ikaw, you probably could be doing something else. You could be a lady who lunches only. Oy,
Yeah.
kumusta?
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's just not something I choose to do because I feel like, we have to do more. And maybe it boils back to like, the stories that I was learning, from my grandfather, for example, or my family, right? They always, because when I was small, sir, I grew up with even my parents telling me, nako, if there's a war, you will be like this. Puro na lang, all the time saying, if there's a war, if there's a war, if there's a war. And I remember being so frustrated saying, Mommy naman, it's always na lang, there's a war, and like this, like that. But as I became an adult, it made sense to me, right?
Right. So anyway,
as much as we like to do things that we'd rather do, like I'd rather be out in the ocean, but I'm not. Because I feel compelled, sir. I feel like this is our time to do something for the younger generation.
Right. In which case, it brings me to my point. If there's something that you can do, and for example, in your case, I think it's part of it is consciousness raising,
Yeah.
creating more awareness. We need to think long term. At the end of the day, meron tayong dapat pananaw. What kind of a nation do we want?
Mm-hmm.
Ako, I spelled it out. I want a righteous, peaceful, and a joyful nation.
Yeah.
Tarungan, mapayapa, at masayahin bayan. Bakit masaya? Masaya dahil magkasama tayo, pamilya. Mapayapa, meaning to say, mapayapa, may pagkain, may health service, may education para sa, at makatarungan, meaning sabihin, alam ko na pag may makikipasalamuha ako sa isang nasa gobyerno o sa negosyo, hindi ako gagaguhin.
Yeah.
Hindi ako lalapastanganin. Hindi ululukuhin. So kung gano'n yung pananaw ko, how do we get there? How do we get to point B from point A? This is what we are, okay, sige, sabihin natin, there is a seed of a national identity. Mm-hmm. Hindi naman zero. There is a seed. But how do we grow this? So siguro, Pia, sabihin natin, short, medium to long term, baka 10 taon talaga. Sa China nga, ang China, 100 years sila eh.
Yeah.
100 years. So I think we also need to have a 100-year vision.
Mm-hmm.
We need to have a 100-year vision. And we need to be able to look for the right, kumbaga, yeah, ideally sana ganito, ganyan, but we just have to pray in and look for the next one or two guys that to whom we can pass the flame.
Yeah.
We need to pass the flame But in the meantime, we need to protect the flame.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We need to pass the flame of love of country, and we need to protect the flame. Okay. And if we can grow the flame, why not?
Why not?
In the for example, meron dyan, may ibang tao dyan na ganito rin pala. So magsama tayo. One candle can make a lot of difference. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 can make more. Di ba? Or if we're just talking about matchsticks, you know what they said? One matchstick can burn 1,000,000 trees.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And so for our final words, sir, what would you, I'm sure you're a grandpa, right? Are you?
Yeah.
How would you tell this to your little grandchildren, for example?
Yeah. I'm glad you asked that.
Yeah. So you can teach me when I become a grandma.
I tell them stories. You know, I tell them stories. It's a little bit difficult to let's say in my case, my kids go to an excellent little school. They belong to a school system called individualized instructions. Parang individualized instruction. But their material is basically US created. It's excellent in terms of mastery. Yes. Excellent. It's excellent in terms of helping the kids to think. They're very, very articulate, grabe. Grabe. My 5-year-old, 5-year-old grandson, I was having lunch with him the other day, and the cat was bothering him because he's eating lunch. And he told his ate, he's 5 years old, he said, "Will you please distract the cat because I'm having lunch?" Distract. When did they use the word distract? Hindi distract. 5 years old. He knew exactly what he was saying. So it's excellent. But they have us. Pero sabi ko, lagi ko silang you need to understand also, hindi kayo Amerikano, ha? Pilipino kayo. So kinakausap namin yan. So meron sila mga frame of mind na, hindi Pilipino. But ang tatalino, Pia, grabe, ang tatalino nila. Pero hindi sila Pinoy. So dapat maituro yun sa ko dyan. So kinatagalog namin sila. How do we transfer it? I make kwento. Like, this is not education, but in a sense it is. Teaching them values. For example, during what do you call it? All Saints Day, All Souls Day, when you go to the
Holy Week, like that?
Not Holy Week, yung November 1st?
All Souls Day.
All Saints Day, All Saints. And we visit the dead, right? We visit our dead. I would bring them, and when we get there, I would just tell them, kinukwento ko yung kwento ng kanilang lolo at lola. So I go back, how? Give them a good story. Not something you created, but let's go back to the roots and tell and put it in a good light.
Thank you so much, 𝗘𝗱𝘂𝘂𝗂𝗂. Till the next time. Or I wish I had more time, but till the next time. I'll see you again, sir. Thank you for your wisdom as always.
Thank you, Pia.
Have a blessed Saturday. Hasta luego, everyone.
Hasta luego. See you.
Bye.